Hey guys, we got another Q&A video for you today. Let's get into it. So Gamesplay Greg says, how are we going to keep the game from going stale after the initial burst of interest? Will there simply be too much content that folks are hooked? Will we get new merchants and events sprinkled over time? So there's a few reasons the games get stale, and we're hoping that the Bazaar avoided most of them, or at least prolong the time that it takes the game to get stale. So when you think about other auto battlers, the players are basically drafting from one set of cards. There's one set of cards that you're learning and playing with over and over again. Whereas in the Bazaar, we have a set of cards, a full set of cards for each hero. So instead of just playing with one card set, we're gonna be playing with up to 6. And that just means it'll take 6 times as long for everything to get solved, and that's without even taking into account all the emergent, like matchup-specific knowledge. The other reason these games get stale is because a meta gets established. So in other auto battlers, you're playing with that one set of cards and you have a reroll button. So pretty much every game, you're gonna see every unit. And by design, these games give you a lot of control over how many stores you see, how many refreshes you get. So basically, if you know what's good on a given patch, you can force it at least a little bit. You can steer your draft in a specific direction with a lot of control in other auto battlers. So as soon as people figure out what the best builds are in any given patch, everybody starts copying those builds, forcing, whatever the best strategy that patch is. And then the game gets stale, right? Because everyone's like, oh, well, it's just whoever gets this subtype first, they just win. So I'm not gonna play till they patch that out, sort of. That's kind of the issue these other games run into. Bazaar is not gonna have that because we don't have a reroll button. We don't let you steer your draft with as much control as those other games. The Bazaar is more about just having this insane diversity and variety of encounters that you're gonna run into, and then you're making the best choices within those that are presented to you. It's less about like knowing what the best strategy is before you start, and then steering your draft that way. That we're trying to avoid that. We want to avoid forcing as much as we can. So basically, yeah, more card sets, a less solvable meta. There's more card sets and it's a less solvable meta because we don't have the refresh system that the other auto battlers do. So we think those two things will make our game take a lot longer to get stale than others. But on top of that, we are building it for live ops, which basically means after the game is out, we're going to keep building on it and evolving the game over time continually. It's a living product. It's not just like we release the game and that's what it is, and maybe release a couple expansions. It's going to be much more involved than that. We're going to have a lot of new content coming in, a lot of reworks, a lot of refreshes, a lot of seasonal things, special events. The gameplay of the Bazaar can change a lot just by changing the encounters that are in the pool without changing the cards at all. So yeah, we think just regular content releases will help a lot with this, but even if we didn't have regular content releases, we just think this game would take orders of magnitude more time to solve than other auto battlers, and that alone will take it longer to get stale because we're putting so much focus on replayability. How do you plan to react to some buying helper plugin where based on what they see on screen, they tell you what to buy, basically a drafting assist tool? This has actually come up a decent amount in card design because sometimes we propose a mechanic and we realize that if the mechanic could just be invalidated by some third-party tool, we kind of can't design it because it'll inevitably happen. Because we've seen it in so many other strategy games. Honestly, we think that a drafting tool isn't going to be that helpful in the Bazaar because we've really focused on contextual drafting and like synergy-based drafting. So that basically means that, okay, in a game like Arena or Hearthstone Arena specifically, you run into this issue where the drafting's really lame because it's not very contextual. You're basically just evaluating every card in a vacuum, like how good is this in the arena format, and you just take like the highest pick order card. So a drafting tool for that kind of game is very effective, or at least more effective than in a game like the Bazaar. In the Bazaar, when you see an item, it's completely contextual how good it is for you. Like, yeah, some items are stronger on average in a vacuum than others, but depending on what your build is that run, the way that you evaluate each item should be radically different because we're focusing so much on synergy-based cards. So this basically means that, I don't think that you can realistically program a tool that takes into account every single factor and does the drafting for you. Because even drafting in a game like Magic the Gathering is a lot less complex than what we're doing. And, I think that you can't really build a draft tool that will beat good players when it comes to a game like Magic. Basically, I think that just the fact that it's contextual-based choices makes it hard for a tool like that to ruin the game. But also, you need just a lot of like foresight into how your strategy is going to play out. You need to understand what your class is good and weak against. There's just there's so many variables at play because we're putting so much focus on replayability and making each run feel different. That I just really don't think the game's going to devolve into just like pick order based drafting. It's something we're very conscious of. It's something we're trying to avoid. We really don't think this will come up. How much of a problem do you consider the complexity of item interactions when it comes to the overall DPS or shield gain calculations on the player's end? For example, calculating DPS of different weapons in consideration of item activation, cooldown. So these are a lot of multi-syllable words. I think what you're basically asking is the player going to have to do a lot of math, and wouldn't that make the game less fun if that was the case? Basically, no. At no point does it benefit you to do DPS calculations. That since the fight auto battles, you don't have to make any inputs. You don't have a higher chance of winning by being able to calculate DPS and shield output and stuff. You just make the best choices you can, try to make your build as strong as you can, choose which item is going to be best for you that run, and then you go into the fight and see how it plays out. So if you want to do that math manually, you can, but you can also just like watch it play out and get the same result with a lot less mental strain. So we basically don't think there's any like mechanical advantage to doing that kind of math, and that's why people won't do it. It's just tedious. Lizark asks, how is the upgrade system working at the moment? Are there still levels? Is there a rarity system, affixes? So in the build that we're working on right now, we're in our last sprint going into a demo build. That's a really important milestone for us. So we've removed the level system, and right now what we're testing is a 3 rarity system. So there's common, uncommon, and rare items that cost 1, 2, and 3 gold respectively. And we have put in the affix system, which is basically just a system where you can upgrade an item to give it like a special effect. I don't know if you guys saw maybe in last year's build, I think around November, we posted a video of our like vertical slice build. We had Forja in there, and she could basically keep tacking on abilities to each of your items. Modifying is kind of like that, but it could also, transform the timing of the card or just the general behavior. So the idea is like, okay, you have dagger, but then if you upgrade it, it could be poison dagger or icy dagger or fire dagger as a lame example. And then each of those versions, depending on which one you upgrade it into, would have a different on-hit effect. If you have fiery dagger, it burns them. So it's like a more special way of upgrading your cards. You can think of it kind of like the more special, higher rarity enchanted items in loot tables in more RPG-like games. But yeah, the affix system is going to be in there. We're testing it. We really think that system is like 10 times cooler when the card art actually changes and all the visual feedback's there. So that's not going to be in there just yet. We're basically just going to see a name change on the card and then the effect, but it'll look the same for this demo build right now. But yeah, that's what we're working on right now. So 3 rarities, we've gotten rid of the level system. Pricing is 1, 2, or 3 across the board. For items, there's some events with pricier options. And yeah, that's one of the main features we're looking to test going into this build this month. Prep Guy says, do any items take priority over another? For example, if you have 2 separate items that are triggered to go off at the same time, will they happen simultaneously, or will there be a priority sequence like left to right? And if you and your opponent both have something triggered to go off at the same time, what would happen? Is it simultaneous? Both blows would be lethal? Or would it just be a tie? So this is a great question. We've had to define a lot of these tiebreaker rules for things that happen. We think it'll be pretty unlikely for 2 things to go off at the same time for a few reasons. Your charge speed is something that is affected, like mechanically. We have a speed stat that makes your stuff charge faster. It's very unlikely that you'll have 2 identical base stat items that go off at the same time. If they do, though, it resolves left to right if they go off literally at identical times. On top of that, each item will likely have some sort of visual effect cast time, and the damage will only resolve at the right time for that visual effect. So what you guys have been seeing in the builds is like the item goes off and then there's instantly an effect, instantly the impact, or you've seen a flat 0.5 second cast time across everything. So an item charge up, uses itself, then the damage happens half a second later. No visual effect there yet, but well, we're basically gonna have a lot of these tie-breaking variables involved there when it comes to, you know, cast times. But yeah, the idea is it's just a real-time game. It's not about I think in the engine it goes down to a millisecond breakdown. So in order for two items to go off or to resolve at the same time, they would have to match to the millisecond. And if that happens, the effects resolve left to right. But I don't remember which player is prioritized. It's one of those niche rules. As expansions come out in the game, do you plan on replacing old cards with new ones or just adding cards? If add, do you plan on eventually making formats such as standard and modern? That's a great question. One of the ways we're going to monetize in this game is to let people get premium versions of cards. So we are a little wary of selling something to a player and then just taking it out of the game. So like, you know, if they bought the premium version of Jabalian Dagger, and then we just removed it from the Pygmalion card set in a patch, that could be pretty disheartening for a lot of our players, and we wouldn't think that's fair to them. So I think, you know, in most cases, we'll err on the side of redesigning a card so that it still fits cohesively into the card set. I'm sure that we're gonna do class reworks down the line, just as we learn more about our game engine and how it works. There hasn't really been a game like this before, so we're still getting better at card design every day, and I'm sure that just like with MOBAs, when they go back and rework a character, we'll have to do the same with our card sets. But yeah, I think we're not going to be removing art assets from the game, as in we're not going to like remove an item, period. We would just completely rework its effect so that it made sense for our goals instead. At least we'll try to. You know, maybe there's a chance we remove one, but yeah, so for us over time, we plan on adding cards to card sets. We want to give you reasons to keep logging in over time. Like I said, it is a game built to be a live service, so we really want to just give you reasons to keep coming back. So that means, you know, even if you main a character, like one of the first characters in the game, and we're releasing expansions down the line where we introduce new heroes to the game, it's still a reason for you to log in, because there will at least be some new cards for your class that you main, even if you're not interested in the new one. So I think, you know, the goal is definitely to keep adding new cards over time, just to spice things up. But also, you know, as we get better at design, the game should get more fun because we can make sets more fun. I don't think that our game is going to need formats, because formats are just like rules that define what cards in your collection you can use for gameplay. But we don't have a collection. You just do a run and draft. So we can change the cards that are appearing for you pretty flexibly. We don't need to like make formats or anything like that, but it's an interesting idea down the line. Could definitely Hall of Fame some like super powerful cards and then maybe have those only show up in a special degenerate format. I don't know. No, I think we'd probably want to keep all of our cards current and playable at all times. That's what I would say. Okay. Is release very soon or is it soon? It is soon, but it is this year. Mizzano says, what are your thoughts on showing concurrent player numbers like Steam does, and are you going to do that? You know, my guess is, like with most developers, we'll show them if they're worth bragging about. If they're not, we'll hide them and be embarrassed. Why is there such a huge radio silence period? Does it have to do with polish or reworking the core game? Well, we have a lot of big new systems getting introduced into our build, and most of the pretense for us doing a video is like having something new to show you guys. So we've been working with pretty rough-looking development builds, just working out bugs and designing and integrating these new systems. And hopefully they'll be demonstrable for you guys here in a few weeks, and then we'll make a video to show you all the changes we made then. But yeah, it's, you know, part of it was also, we did that update video, the last big one, and the feedback from that was really mixed. There's a lot of negativity, which that was new to us. We haven't gotten that before, so that might have been part of it. Like, we just want to make sure that like we're putting our best foot forward. And you know, when I streamed the game and showed a bunch of stuff in practice, the feedback was like overwhelmingly harsh. It was a lot of people treating it like a finished product, not in development product. So yeah, I don't know. This has been a whole like learning experience, showing the development process firsthand. I think some people love it, and for some people it's been very constructive. It does make our job harder. It's just like more stuff on our plate, and it's not really something you can delegate. Like if you want to explain the design process through videos, you need the designers to like script and do and record the videos, and that's there's only so much of that we can do. Like especially the busier we get, the more time we spend on the game. So, but yeah, I mean it's all good news on our end. You know, growing the team, bringing on some really good people, and yeah, just excited to launch later this year. And by the way, yeah, we're definitely not reworking the core game. What you guys are going to see is just a better, more fleshed out version of what we've already been working on. The core game we're very happy with. We think it's a really solid engine. Dialawler says Ray Noodle's hair is getting so fabulous. It is. Never cutting it again. Jet Dar says, also Ben, I see that you're lacking in your forearms. Might have to start rock climbing again. Our staff are not pieces of meat. Pavlici says, so you basically end up doing another better Battlegrounds with Expedition Draft matchmaking system. Not sure how I feel about that. I think the changes go beyond that. I think it is pretty different when you're not drafting from one card set. You're matching multiple different card sets against each other. I think it's different when you're like in the auto battlers, you have one type of store. There's like 5 options and that's your store. But in our game, we have like dozens of different ones. This merchant sells small items. This merchant sells expensive items. Here's an encounter where the store is getting robbed. Do you steal this item while the shopkeeper's not looking, or do you fight the burglar and engage a fight then and there? It's like a pretty drastically different system, I would say, from traditional Battlegrounds, but we think it keeps all the same strengths and does them even better. But yeah, there's a lot more work put into the journey and the adventure and the immersion and the encounters. So it's another way to think about it. I think like a more accurate example would be more like Slay the Spire, but then instead of bosses, you fight other players. And then the fights are auto battles rather than manual and input heavy. Yeah, I think that's like the better analogy. But yeah, it's you just got to try it for yourself. It's hard to make a one-to-one comparison because you know, there's elements that are similar to other games that we like, but we think the Bazaar is a pretty radically different product from all the other strategy games on the market. Colin says, I think a 2v2 mode would be ideal for the social element. You wait for your friend and then queue into a random duo. You and your friends build, synergize with each other to a degree to help each other in fights. Yeah, we've been thinking about ways to do more social modes. It's really important to us. You know, we're looking at ways to maybe, you know, create a lobby to play with your friends or to play against one friend. But 2v2 modes are interesting as well. It's hard to imagine how to combine 2 rows of items so that they synergize with each other, because you have to completely change the game board layout. And, you know, now you have 40 slots on screen instead of 20, and where do they all go and how do the visual effects look? It's hard to like combine 2 players into one screen. The way the game is designed, and we've looked into a lot of that stuff. There's this issue you run into with co-op play where one player just kind of makes the decisions for everybody. And I think that's something just kind of interesting. It's like we want to avoid it. Like if one player, like strategy games are just decision-based games. You're making decisions. A lot of times you get one person that kind of is like just better at the game, so they do everything for both players. And then the other player doesn't have as much fun. So, yeah, it's interesting for us how to make like trying to think of how to make a strategy game more social, and we're open to a lot of ways of doing it. And honestly, I think we're gonna look to a lot of other features to potentially do this, like externally. For example, we found that as we play the game, we always want to share our builds and our crazy fights with people. We always want to show them to people. So just adding like a share button in the client lets people like throw a video on Twitter of the fight they just had with their cool build going off. Making that like a one-click process, we think could do a lot to make it feel more social and more like leaning more on the external community outside of the client to handle the socialness. I think could help a lot. But yeah, it's an interesting idea, and if you have a more specific idea of how to do a 2v2 mode, don't hesitate to tell us. We'd love to hear ideas for any stuff like that. So, yeah. Have you guys thought about allowing two people who match up with each other the option to see each other again? I think it would be a cool feature if you saw someone with an interesting build, and after you fight, you both click a button that allows you to match up again if you both finish your next turn in, say, 30 seconds. Inspired by the last video, just commented here because it's the newest one. Yeah, that is interesting. There's a lot of costs to that. We'd have to start sending a lot of real-time data that we just currently don't. So it's a pretty big networking overhaul. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's hard for me to, it sounds very hard to implement, and I'm not sure that the immediate need is there or the payoff is high enough to justify the amount of like work. But it's an interesting idea. Yeah. I think overall you're pairing removing fun with interaction too much. Sure, removing fun is a part of interaction, but only a subset of what interaction can truly bring. IMO, I think removing interaction just to avoid destructive interaction is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Tom wrote a really thoughtful essay. I'm sure we'll put it up on the screen here and you guys can pause and read it. I do appreciate the thoughtful response. I disagree with every ounce of it and I think it's nonsensical. So let me kind of go into why. You talk about all of the benefits from interaction, and yet you don't list a single one. You say there's so many, tons of benefits. We literally sat down for days trying to like talk about what are the benefits of interactivity. There's a couple. We think it makes the game more replayable very easily, because you can just rely on people doing different stuff every game. And we also think it's rewarding to a subset of players. Some players really care about beating someone else, but it's a very small demographic. Where they strongly care about beating somebody else. Just as many, if not more, people that are on the other end of the spectrum that have ladder anxiety, or they prefer a more like running their experience their way rather than having their experience controlled so much by what the other guy's doing. The point about Battlegrounds having more interesting fights is just ridiculous. I mean, you're comparing a game with like one output, which is damage and stats going up, to a game with that does the same thing but with strictly more types of outputs. There's some damage, some shielding, some healing, some freezing, some dazing. You can change charge speeds on stuff. You can have stuff trigger other stuff. We're still gonna have token spawning. We're gonna have like channeled effects that do damage over time. You're comparing two combat engines that are so similar, and yet one of them has like numbers getting bigger, and one of them has all the same stuff but more. And you're saying that there's more you can do in this one. I don't understand this point at all. And I think that if maybe you're judging it on face value and maybe the lack of visual effects and all of that. I mean, I agree, like currently in the build that you saw, just because all the visual feedback isn't there, it's probably less satisfying to watch than a fully polished AAA product from Blizzard that's already out. Heimdall says the progression felt too much on rails, not like an epic journey, and that it would feel better if it was on paths. I think the reason it felt like on rails is because there were two events. There was Merchants and there were Forja, like the upgrade event. Like there's a skill one too sometimes, but the reason it felt like it was on rails is because there were two encounters, not dozens like the final product will have. So if we showed you the same build with two encounters, and we did the pathing system you describe, it would not feel fun, because it's just two encounters over and over again. So because of that, I think like, no, this is like having the pathing thing, there's something to it. Like there's progression systems with exploring with pathing, but I don't think it's a fun choice most of the time. I don't think pretending to do foresight 40 steps ahead makes the game more fun. I don't think that we've considered doing more pathing systems like that. We're actually a fan of how Monster Train did it. They kind of simplified the Slay the Spire thing, so there's just two paths. So we were thinking of doing stuff like that, and to some extent, the way our new encounters work, they sort of are they sort of do some pathing. Like some of them are going to have continuity. Like sometimes because you picked a certain encounter, that one will open up a different encounter. It's not just like a series of 3 merchants over and over again. So Bomber TV has some concerns about the level system, and I completely agree. That level system had a bunch of issues with it. Not just complexity, but like most importantly, you just want to know how good a number is, you know? Like in Hearthstone, you know that a 6/6 is big. Whereas in our game, if we have a level system, you know, sometimes 6 damage is good if it's a very early game, but then late game on the same item, that number is meaningless. So it's like, it becomes more ambiguous, like what good stats look like when you have a spread out system like the level system. But yeah, we've completely reworked that. We're going more towards a rarity system and affix system that I think will be a lot more fun. Swingxcalibur suggests the little pre-fight sideboarding phase. Some people have suggested this as a feature. Personally, we just don't think it adds much. I think that interactivity and that need to make real-time inputs at a regular interval every day, I just think it would be tedious. Personally, I don't think it would make the game more fun, and it's very hard to implement. And even if we wanted to add interactivity to the game, I think there are better ways of doing it than this. I think we're just comfortable with the decision we made to limit interactivity between builds. We don't think it's going against the grain that much because TFT has no interactivity and Battlegrounds has no interactivity. And if you honestly disagree with those statements, you should look into how you define interactivity. But yeah, like the way we define interactivity or PvP is just your opponent's decisions affecting your decisions. We don't think that your opponent's decisions affect your decisions in Battlegrounds or TFT to any meaningful extent. Giovanni says, really love these updates and the way the game is evolving. Keep it up, guys. My only question is how this main game mode relates to esports. How will the competitive scene work? Is this your intention? So we definitely have big esports plans, and it'll be a big focus for our game. We want the Bazaar to be the leading strategy game esport, and we were an esports company long before we were a game developer, so I definitely think we know what we're doing when it comes to the card game space. The esports plans aren't ready to be announced yet, and I think that there's a good chance we want to announce them after launch, a little bit after launch, so that we have a bit of an idea of how the game is received and the community is actually choosing to play the game, which modes seem to be the most conducive for it. But yeah, esports plans are definitely in the works, and I'm really excited about being a developer that does it right in esports. I think it's a very niche knowledge base, the world of esports. It's a very niche industry, so I think we're coming from a good position, just knowing what works and what doesn't. So Matt says, I think the biggest problem for me is the fights don't feel meaningful. It's unclear how the fight is impacting the game as a whole. Yeah, in the build that you saw, there wasn't a lot of visual feedback or rewards at the end of a fight, and I just think that's the entirety of the reason you're feeling that way. In other auto battlers, the only outcome of a fight is somebody's health bar gets damaged at the end. The loser loses some health. So we think the end of our fights will be even more rewarding than that. Sure, the loser will lose a life, but the winner will also get a treasure chest, get some rewards, and yeah, we think it'll be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for your questions and comments. Appreciate you watching this Q&A video. And to be honest, this one was pretty hard to make. A lot of the feedback that we got or comments that we looked at were just these essays that people wrote about, here's how I hate everything you're doing, here's some abstract, loosely defined labels and things that I think you should be trying to fit into. I don't see the point of this. A lot of the stuff is non-constructive, so it's hard to give feedback on. A lot of it is multi-pronged. It's I hate these and these and these features, and I think you should be doing things this and this and this way. It's hard for me to answer comments like that when there's 12 points to address. So just for future Q&A videos, keep that in mind if you guys want to condense your ideas down to one problem or one feeling. It's a lot easier to just respond to a bunch of them right off the bat. But thanks for watching. We'll see you back another week for another update video of The Bazaar.